In this video, I'll show you how to get started with feeder rods and different natural baits in Russian Fishing 4. If we want to use all kinds of natural baits in Russian Fishing 4, we have 4 different rig types to choose from. We can use the simple bottom rig, which is very universal and can be used both in still waters and in flowing waters, and which works especially well for very small fish because it shows even very fine bites directly. Or we use the paternoster rig. This is also a rig that can display very fine and very small bites extremely well. Then we have the inline rig, which tends to be more suitable for waters without current. This rig type also offers high sensitivity when small fish bite. However, the hooking effect is no longer quite as ideal. And last but not least, we come to the loop rig. The loop rig can be used very well in both flowing and still waters. However, because the sinker or feeder is positioned inside a loop, the self-hooking effect is no longer quite as good. Despite all that, you can say that with all of these rig types, the self-hooking effect of the fish is not really that relevant. The fish still hook themselves very well anyway. It might just take a little bit longer sometimes. We'll now take a detailed look at these 4 rig types, and I'll show you how and where you fish with each of them. But first, of course, the question is, what exactly are natural baits? And for that, we simply press I, go into the inventory, and then select natural baits here. And here we already get an overview of the different bait boxes that we can buy. And then we're ready to go. The different categories include, on the one hand, various types of worms, different types of larvae, insect baits. Then we currently have one type of crustacean, ground bait, and dough types, and organic baits. So things like, for example, potatoes, cheese cubes, and so on. That means for you, if you want to fish with these bait types, you can perfectly use these 4 rig types. And if we take a look at one of the rods here, in this case, it's the very cheap Sorrento, which you of course already know from the video, what to buy for bottom fishing under level 20. So this is the cheapest setup you can put together. Then up here, we have the option to choose between these 4 rig types. And the nice thing about these rigs is that we can simply switch back and forth between them. So simple bottom rig, switch to paternoster rig, switched again to inline rig, and then once more switch to loop rig. And the great thing is, during this entire rebuild of the rod, absolutely nothing changes. You can fish all 4 rig types either just with a sinker or by using a feeder basket. That works with all 4 rigs. Even with the simple bottom rig, we can use a feeder basket here, even if the image only shows a sinker attached. So why are there so many different rig types with very similar characteristics and only small differences? From the last Q&A with Russian Fishing 4, we now know that fish don't just have like factors for different weather conditions, different baits, and of course different ground bait mixes, but fish also have like factors for rig types as well, meaning they sometimes prefer one rig type more or sometimes less. And accordingly, we also need to introduce some variation in rig types when we're targeting a very specific fish species. Despite all that, the influence of the rig type is probably not as decisive as the influence of the right ground bait and the right bait. These factors are, of course, much more important for successfully fishing a specific species than the rig type itself. Still, a perfect combination of suitable weather, the perfect rig type, and exactly the right bait might increase the chance of finally getting that long-sought trophy. Because we now have 4 rig types for the same bait, we naturally reach our limit with skill points very quickly. Especially in the early stages, we simply don't get enough skill points to easily skill all rig types. There will be more detailed videos coming soon about distributing skill points for all fishing styles, but also about how to distribute your skill points as an all-round angler who simply likes to use all fishing methods. What's also very important, you can of course use rig types even if you haven't skilled them, so it's not absolutely necessary to skill a rig type before you can use it. Skilled rigs, however, increase the chance of catching larger fish, and also increase the chance of rare fish. So we can see our 4 rig types here relatively early on, all the way up to the loop rig. And out of these 4, I've actually only skilled the loop rig and use it the most. Even though the self-hooking effect isn't ideal, this rig is still very well suited for fish species that bite very cautiously, and it works excellently in both flowing and still waters. And additionally, I also have to say that I simply don't have that many skill points left to skill all rig types. Since I use my account for all fishing methods, I also need to keep skill points available for float fishing, spinning, and sea fishing. If, however, you focus your account entirely on bottom fishing, you'll have enough skill points in the endgame to skill all bottom rigs. Now let's take another look at feeder fishing in practice. So how do we build our rods? How do we use the feeder basket correctly? How do we put together our first ground bait mix and also use the appropriate baits? To make sure you build your setup correctly, definitely watch the basic tutorial on proper setup assembly again. That shows how to correctly build your setups so nothing breaks. I'm currently using the cheapest rods and reels in the game. I only have 4.4 kilograms of line capacity, and for the start, I'm not even using a leader yet. We'll remove that again now. And with this setup, we'll now head to the first spot, which is right here at Mosquito Lake, simply down here at the corner next to the boat. In this area, you can consistently catch Gibel carp and Crucian carp, and with some luck, also smaller carp. And we'll just try that out now. Technically, we don't even need to use a line clip here. We'll simply cast the entire setup as it is with the feeder basket, even though there's currently no ground bait inside. We'll just cast it out like this, lightly loaded. For me, the happy hour is starting now as well. And now, of course, I first put the rod down. And with the Z key, or with the Y key, we now pull the line slightly tight until we can hear the bell at the front. Just pull it very slightly tight. The rod tip does not need to bend down very far at all. If the rod tip is pointing too far downwards, roughly like this, then maybe open the bail once more. That is done with the K key. This loosens the line again, and then we close the bail once more. That was now again with the Z key or the Y key. And then you pull the line very gently, just straight, until it is tight. And that's already the first fish. So it really did not take long at all. There is already a reaction. And now we can see it as well. The line is also pulling to the side. The rod tip is bending properly downwards. Now the fish is actually on. That means we can pick it up. We can also immediately see the indicator here that the fish is hooked, and we can hear a bit of the drag as well. That is good. We can now slightly increase that. And with this, we have already caught the first Crucian carp. Very nice. Yes. And that was now here on a very simple basic setup. The nice thing is, recently with the last patch, we also received additional information. We now have a really nice overview here. From when is a fish worth keeping? So, from when is it a legal-sized fish that also has a good value? Crucian carp below 280 grams have a significantly lower silver value. From 280 grams up to the trophy weight of 1.8 kilograms, everything that is shown in green becomes more valuable, the closer the weight of your caught fish is to the trophy weight. So the closer the weight of your caught fish is to the yellow star, the more valuable the fish is if you want to sell it at the fish market. The price of rare fish is then a bit higher again, and the price of very rare fish, meaning super trophies, is then significantly higher once more. And here in the back section, we can then see the personal records, as well as absolute records, water body records, and weekly records of the caught fish. Now I cast out again directly at this spot. Cast out loosely. The line is of course tightened again. And ideally, we also use additional rods. That means we're fishing here with 3 rods. So at this spot as well, I now cast out a small hook and a worm once more. And then we will see what bites here now on the worm, for example. Yes, and that is simply how you start bottom fishing. The next step is then, once you have already caught a few fish, that you of course also create a suitable ground bait mix. I quickly pull out the 2 fish again. That really goes very fast here. So a spot that always works very well, and that even with very simple baits. Gibel carp is now also here at this spot, and that also just on white bread as bait. And here as well on the worm, there was an immediate reaction, even relatively strong. I need to increase the drag once more. It is still clicking, so I was able to turn it up a bit more. Very nice. And there we have a nice perch here. Also very nice, so really good weight, almost 1 kilogram. So price-wise, that one will already be quite good as well. And that means I am happy to stay here at this spot with the worm. If I can catch perch like this here, I'm of course happy to keep them. In our net, I now have a perch, a Gibel carp, and a Crucian carp. Gibel carp and Crucian carp are peaceful fish, and the perch is a predator. And for the peaceful fish in the game, we can create a ground bait mix. So, a ground bait that slightly increases the fish population at the spot where we are currently fishing. The ground bait influences a spot in such a way that some fish become fewer and other fish become a bit more numerous. Accordingly, by using such ground bait, we naturally catch more of our target fish. How exactly this works with the ground bait, what it exactly influences, and which components are also important, that will come later in the tutorial section about carp fishing. So we will go into more detail there, and there will also be a separate video about the actual spots. What a spot actually is, and what a spot can influence. What is important for you is this: you can create a ground bait mix for peaceful fish, but not for predatory fish. Predatory fish do not react to any kind of ground bait. And there we already have another bite on the worm. However, we will now remove that again, this setup here, and we will rebuild that one as well. From the simple sinker, we now also switch here to a very simple feeder basket. I will take this one here, and now we build ourselves a suitable ground bait mix. To do that, you simply press the N key, go here on the side to ground bait mixing, and here we first go all the way down to the section that is unlocked. So at the beginning, you have something unlocked like roach ground bait mix, or also something like Crucian carp and Gibel carp, and we now create that. So for that, we need biscuit, millet porridge, and sunflower oil. You can find all of these components in the tackle shop. So in the tackle shop, here in the ground bait section, and if you click twice on the title, you can see here first the base, then all additives, later on the different feed pellets, and then also the different aromas that we can all use here. Additionally, there are also various components from the grocery store. You can absolutely use those from time to time in ground bait as well, such as oat flakes, condensed milk, or milk powder, as well as rice and cheese, for example. So, at this spot, I'm now using 3 rods, in this case, twice the cheapest setup in the game. And the third version is the Karmamector. That is the feeder rod from the video, What to Buy from Level 20. So that is your mid-game setup, with which you can already fish very well for your first common carp later on. And here, with this very simple setup, with this very cheap feeder basket, here we are now using Gibel carp and Crucian carp ground bait mix. You can also type that into the search at the top, and then we find here these larger balls for Gibel carp and Crucian carp. And of course, we now load those onto all 3 rods. And for Gibel carp and Crucian carp, we now of course remove the worm and also use a larger hook here. A size 6 hook or a size 4 hook is not a bad choice at all for the beginning. This way you still have a very, very high frequency, meaning you catch a lot of fish, which in turn is important so that you gain skill points faster. If later on you want to catch significantly larger fish, however with a lower frequency, then you might also use a size 1 hook. I'll start here now with the size 6 hook. I also use just white bread as bait here. And now our simple rods are ready to go. When I cast out in a moment, I of course want my ground bait and my baits to all be in one single spot. Ground bait has an effective radius of 2.5 meters, and that means within this radius, I of course want all 3 rods to be positioned. And that in turn means that when we use ground bait, we also use the line clip. If you do not use ground bait, you also do not need a line clip. You do not catch more fish just because you use a line clip. The line clip is set with control plus and minus on the number pad. And if you have a 60% keyboard, then it is plus and question mark or the check mark key next to the backspace key. I now set the line clip to 6 meters, cast out loosely, place the rod down, and then briefly press Z or Y on your keyboard. This closes the bail, and we immediately get feedback from the bite indicator when a fish bites. We do exactly the same thing with the second setup. So 6 meters line clip set, cast out loosely. And here as well, we do not load the power to the maximum, because if we cast into the line clip with maximum force, we increase the wear on our setup. And of course, we do not want that. Accordingly, we try to load up exactly enough power so that weight-wise, the sinker and the bait fly straight into the line clip. And there goes the first fish already. Just a very short notification, and immediately it swims to the side. Well, look at that. A small Crucian carp, just barely still valuable. And here at the front, it also starts immediately, already with the second rod. So cast out loosely again, close the bail, tighten the line a bit, and here we do not really see a strong movement yet. But when we pick up the rod, we already see the indicator here, so strike immediately here. Maybe also strike properly with control and right mouse button so that the hook sets well, and then reel it in calmly. And now we cast out here for the 4th time, and with the 3rd rod, we now cast out for the 5th time. And why do we have to count? Because we are throwing ground bait onto the spot. We have now thrown 5 times 10 grams of ground bait into this spot. That means there are now 50 grams of ground bait lying on this spot. And that is also a very important point. We can overfeed spots. That means there is so much ground bait on the spot that the fish are no longer interested in our bait. And of course, we must avoid that. If we take a look at the ground bait here, in this case, Gibel carp and Crucian carp ground bait, we of course see the contents, meaning the components used in the mix. But we also see the effect duration, 16 hours in this case, and how much weight one ball has. One ball is 10 grams of ground bait. So, if you are standing at a spot like this, where you also have a very good bite frequency, and pull out one fish after another, and with every new cast you throw in new ground bait, make sure that you throw in at most between 100 and 200 grams of ground bait. On the one hand, that of course costs silver, and you do not want to waste unnecessary ground bait. And on the other hand, as mentioned, you can also overfeed a spot very quickly. If you feed a spot and throw between 100 and 200 grams of ground bait onto the spot, or throw it in with a spot rocket, or throw it in with a feeder basket, or throw it in with PVA, it does not matter how. Make sure that the spot is not overfed. And if you fish a spot with 100 to 200 grams, you are not doing anything wrong. Later on in the carp fishing videos, there will be special sections where you might also use more ground bait, and where you then of course match the ground bait precisely to the respective baits and respective fish species. Well, the ground bait already seems to be working quite well. The bite frequency is already pretty good. In this case, I am also taking all the small fish with me. That does not matter to me at all right now, because there are always quite good cafe orders for undersized fish as well. Yes, and ideally, you now also test other baits, because fishing means testing, testing, testing. That is the be-all and end-all. If you now stand here the whole time with just one bait because I told you to use this bread bait, then of course you will not progress in the game. Test different baits on your own, different ground bait components, and of course also different spots across the entire water body. And the next fish, very nice. That means whether you stand here or whether you stand over here naturally influences the spot and which fish can be there, and also which bait is currently working well. So take a good look at the map as well. What does it look like here? Where are slightly deeper areas or edge zones where you can cast to? And especially in the early stages, also fish a lot close to the bank, especially where you have grass edges or also lily pads. You can often find fish particularly well in those areas. Now I have cast out several times. That means that with this fish, I now remove the ground bait from the feeder basket. So I press the V key, immediately go into the setup here, and simply delete the ground bait mix with X, and then continue casting like that. And that means I can now continue fishing here for 16 hours in exactly the same way. The effect of the ground bait naturally decreases more and more. And accordingly, I then start throwing in a bit of ground bait again in the morning hours. So, overnight, I will not top up the feed anymore. And in the morning hours, maybe around 4 o'clock in the morning, I then start throwing in some ground bait again. With the higher quality feeder rods, we can now see here at the rod tip that the tip is pulled very far downward, because right now we are using a feeder basket with a weight of 60 grams, so that you can still clearly detect very fine and small fish bites. We can decide here how we want to set our rod tip. So if you are fishing for very small fish with perhaps a smaller feeder basket, which is also available at 20 grams, then you can of course also set the rod tip to just 14 grams. This will make the rod tip turn green. In that case, it naturally hangs even further down. And because we are now using a 60-gram feeder basket here, we can either set it to 40 grams or even to 56 grams. That means the rod tip no longer hangs quite as far down. It is already a bit stiffer, but of course also overall a bit coarser. And with that, we naturally have more power to cast further, and we still detect fine bites very well. So you can still add a bit of variation here depending on which fish you want to target later on. However, these are components that become significantly more interesting in the end game. But even here, just cast out and immediately another bite. This spot here works well again and again, yes, and now it simply means testing baits. Again and again, testing different dough baits. Dough baits combined with different ground bait mixes. You now have a ground bait mix for Gibel carp and Crucian carp. And this ground bait is relatively neutral. That means this ground bait now attracts more Gibel carp and Crucian carp to the spot. The question, however, is, what do Gibel carp and Crucian carp like right now? So, which bait is currently the bait that works best on these fish? That means that over time, simply by skilling new baits, you can keep using different dough baits here. And this way, you can of course find out which bait works best on the fish and which bait also attracts other fish. And the next fish. Yes. So that's it for feeder rod fishing here. This is the first introduction to bottom fishing with different variations. The important thing, as already mentioned, is trying things out, testing different spots, different baits, and of course also gradually skilling the production of ground bait. If you have not yet skilled ground bait, you should ideally not fish beyond level 12 waters at all. Fish at Mosquito Lake or at the winding rivulet for bottom fish without ground bait until you have skilled ground bait and can produce suitable ground bait mixes. Ground bait preparation is absolutely essential for bottom anglers, because from Old Berg onward, you catch significantly more fish if you use the appropriate ground bait mix. Without suitable ground bait, you will stand at Old Berg for hours and catch significantly fewer fish. That is the advantage of the low-level waters, meaning Mosquito Lake and also the winding rivulet. There, you can already fish very successfully without using any ground bait at all. So, make silver at these waters. Then use that silver not only for better reels and rods, but also for further skilling ground bait preparation, and of course also for acquiring baits. Here, however, it is sufficient if you have skilled up to garlic dough by level 20. You do not need to skill any further, because up to level 20, you also need to save silver for your mid-game setup. That means, up to level 20, skill only up to garlic dough, and in ground bait preparation, skill up to a maximum of level 5, so that you can also use corn flour here. With that, you are already very far ahead in both ground bait preparation and bait production. And you can already produce the most important baits and ground bait components for most fish. So much for feeder rod fishing here. The first steps into bottom fishing. If this helped you, leave a thumbs up. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the future bottom fishing videos. In this playlist here for bottom fishing, the next videos will cover different spots and of course also carp fishing, or later on the big fishing with bait fish for sturgeon. So we will see each other in the next video or in the next live stream. Until then, tight lines.